There have been many adaptations of the Odyssey in movies and TV over the years, and pretty much all of them changed the original poem in different ways. Now we're going through it again, but this time things get a bit more animated. Literally, cartoons, kid shows, the whole thing. And like before, we're starting from the oldest and working our way forward. First, we have Ulysses 31 from 1981. A Japanese-French sci-fi anime set in space during the 31st century. By the great cosmos, this might be one of the coolest Odyssey adaptations ever made. An 80s space anime version of the Odyssey is kind of peak already. You almost can't go wrong with that idea. The adventures are always fun, and there's something interesting happening in every episode. Aside from the first and last ones, most of them are pretty episodic, so you won't be lost if you watch them out of order. A sci-fi version of Odysseus is such a cool idea. It's surprising Hollywood hasn't made a big live-action version yet. Imagine if Christopher Nolan did one instead. Although, if you think about it, Battlestar Galactica is kind of the closest thing we've gotten to a sci-fi version of the Odyssey.
So say we all.
She wants to keep Odysseus on her island forever.
Ha! Fat chance! Gotta go! See ya! Oh, yeah, she's got me on a pretty tight leash.
Then there's Wishbone from 1995, a kid's show about a clever dog who imagines himself in all sorts of classic stories, while his humans live out modern parallels. It's just as educational as it is fun, and the episode Homer Sweet Homer covers the Odyssey. It might just be the funniest version of Odysseus you'll ever watch.
You know, ancient Greek is a little tough, but once you start chewing on it, it tastes pretty good.
Here's a blast from the past. Before he was Dean Winchester or Soldier Boy, Jensen Ackles actually appeared in an episode of Wishbone for his very first acting role.
You made those words up.
Next up is the Saturday cartoon series Mythic Warriors, Guardians of the Legend from 1998, with each episode exploring different characters and stories from Greek mythology. There are 4 episodes about Odysseus, but they don't cover his entire journey and make a few changes. Then we have Mission Odyssey from 2002. This is probably the most kid-friendly version of Odysseus out there. The characters are fun, and the animation looks great, with a lot of action, and you can tell a lot of love went into it. Like Ulysses 31, it covers much of the story from the poem, though there are plenty of changes. It also includes a bunch of other Greek mythology characters. Just so you know if you're planning to watch Mission Odyssey, IMDb and some streaming services have the episode order wrong.
What? Whatting a what?
The real first episode is The Eye of the Cyclops, which shows how Odysseus' journey begins after Troy and how he met his crew. The series is mostly episodic, but the first episode sets up key parts of the story, so watching it first is a good idea. For some looser adaptations, there's the SpongeBob SquarePants movie from 2004. The Simpsons also did an Odyssey segment in the episode Tales from the Public Domain.
That pig looks like Lenny.
DuckTales had its own take too, with Home Sweet Homer, which actually happens years after Odysseus' journey and follows his nephew Homer trying to return to Ithaquack with help from Uncle Scrooge and the kids. And then there's Epic the Musical, a modern concept album retelling of the Odyssey by Jorge Rivera Herranz. It's probably one of the most popular Odyssey adaptations in recent years, and it's even getting an official animated movie now. For honorable mentions, we have The Odyssey from 1987 by Burbank Animation Studios, and Ulysses, an animated classic from 1998 by Mondo TV. Yes, the same studio that made The Legend of the Titanic, which, let's just say, has a reputation. Surprisingly though, their Odyssey adaptation is actually darker than most of the versions we've talked about. And then we have the animated Odyssey from 2000 by Villanima Studios, which aired on HBO. The English dub is pretty difficult to track down, but you can find Russian and Greek versions online. Also worth mentioning is Olympus Guardian from 2002, a South Korean cartoon series about Greek and Roman myths that includes the Odyssey as well. So now let's get into how these adaptations compare to Homer's original poem, what they get right, and what they change, starting with Ulysses 31. And yeah, since every adaptation does things differently, spoiler warning from here on. So with Ulysses 31, there are a lot of changes right from the start. The story takes place in the 31st century, and Ulysses, which is just the Latin name for Odysseus, is visiting a space station called Troy that looks like a giant helmet. He's actually friends with King Priam here, so there's no Trojan War like in the poem. And the show never really explains why he's there to begin with. There's also some kind of problem back on Earth, and he needs to get home before Penelope ends up choosing a new husband. But the anime doesn't go into much detail about that either. In this version, Telemachus is a kid traveling with Ulysses during the journey, along with an alien kid named Yumi and a small robot called Nono. Ulysses himself is portrayed more as a strong warrior than a cunning strategist, and the kids often come across as the smarter ones.
Why should we take such a risk? Dangerous! It's a trap set by the gods!
That's possible. Quite possible, Yumi.
Their ship is literally called the Odyssey, and characters like Nestor, the king that Telemachus visits to learn about his father, and Euryclea, the maid who recognizes Odysseus by his scar in the poem, are part of Odysseus' crew here. The show does include a Cyclops story, but it's very different from the poem. On his trip back to Earth in the first episode, the Cyclops kidnaps Telemachus and other children to drain their life energy and give it to his followers, who are blind and can't see without it. Odysseus defeats the Cyclops while rescuing the children, but this ends up angering the gods of Olympus.
Who do you think you are to defy Poseidon?
As punishment, they trap him in an unknown region of space called Olympus, erase all the navigation charts from his ship, and place most of his crew in a lifeless stasis. Odysseus, along with the kids and the robot, are the only ones awake, and now they have to find the kingdom of Hades to save the rest of the crew and eventually get back home. Here, all the gods in this series are pretty much hostile and want Odysseus dead, and we hardly ever see them. Sometimes you just hear their voices, or a giant floating head appears in space. Athena doesn't appear in the anime at all to help Odysseus. There's also an army called the Trident, who serve Poseidon and act like stormtroopers carrying out the gods' orders. The show keeps the gods mysterious. Maybe they're more like alien beings with godlike powers, kind of like the Q continuum in Star Trek. There's no Sickenese in the anime, but it does include the Lotus Eaters. Here they're like fairy-like creatures with wings. The giant cannibal Lastrygonians also appear, and are actually handled in a cool sci-fi way. So, they're not giants here, but anyone who gets near their planet gets shrunk by a device, and they even show King Antiphates. And unlike Homer's story, they're not cannibals at all here. The anime just doesn't go there. They also have Aeolus and his weird family, but here he's a straight-up villain, kinda like Baron Harkonnen from Dune. And instead of the Bag of Winds, it's a magic box that can show the way to Earth, though they can't open it or destroy everything like in the poem. The sirens show up too.
Just who are you, lady?
And yes, Odysseus gets tied to the mast like in the poem, but in this version, they're creepy, living metal beings that feed on human energy.
Raise your hand if ill.
Scylla and Charybdis are here as well, but instead of monsters, they're twin planets, one made of freezing ice and the other made of blazing fire.
No one has ever survived the charms of these two ladies.
There's no Phaeacians part, no prophecy about Helios's cattle, and no Island of the Sun God. The Circe part is in the show too, and Hermes even warns Odysseus like in the poem. But here, Hermes is a ship commander whose crew gets captured by Circe and turned into swine, forced to build this giant library tower so she can gain knowledge of the universe. They do adapt the Calypso part, and here she lives on this crystal planet. But since all the gods are pretty much evil in this version, they order her to trick Odysseus and kill him, unlike the poem, where Odysseus is held there for years before the gods tell Calypso to let him go. It does include the journey to the underworld, the kingdom of Hades, though it's completely different from the poem, and it actually serves as the final episode of the anime. For the final part of the poem, when Odysseus returns home disguised as a beggar, the anime does something really interesting. It reveals that this Odysseus is actually a descendant of the original one, so the gods send him thousands of years back in time to Earth, right to the moment when the real Odysseus is returning home. And that's where the poem's ending plays out. So Penelope is surrounded by suitors in Ithaca, all pressuring her to remarry, and she sets up the classic challenge. Whoever can string Odysseus's bow and shoot through 12 axe heads wins her hand. But in the anime, the original Odysseus gets injured while saving the kids, so the future Odysseus steps in and does the trial instead. Unlike the poem, he doesn't slaughter the suitors, he just floats in the air with his futuristic gear. They think he's some kind of god, and they surrender. So obviously, the rest of the story in the poem, like Telemachus hanging the servants who betrayed them, Penelope testing him with the famous bed carved out of the olive tree, Odysseus visiting his father Laertes, and the final clash with the suitors' families doesn't happen here. But people may rejoice because it shows Argos, the good boy, for a brief second. And that's not even all the differences. The anime has a ton of cool stuff. For example, there's a giant chessboard that Odysseus has to play on, and a villain, King Cronus, who has 2 faces. Guess someone in the 80s was already a Harry Potter fan. They even have a device called the Thought Machine on their spaceship that lets them play virtual reality games. Odysseus wields a laser sword that can transform into a gun, and there are plenty of Greek mythology characters too. Sisyphus rolling his boulder, and Atlas holding up the heavens, and a whole lot more from the myths. The Wishbone episodes are pretty short, so in Homer Sweet Homer, they only cover a small part of the story. We get a brief Calypso part, and a quick run-in with Poseidon, then straight to Odysseus returning as a beggar and Penelope's challenge. Even though Wishbone sometimes touches on darker stuff, obviously there's no massacre of the suitors here, and most of what happens at the end of the Odyssey just doesn't happen. Also, missed opportunity, no scene with Argos and Wishbone together. That would have been the ultimate good boy crossover.
See ya!
Mythic Warriors Guardians of the Legend starts with Odysseus and his crew on their way home, and his sailors stupidly opening the Bag of Winds, landing them on Circe's island. So we don't get the usual suspects. No Sicanies, no Lotus Eaters, no Aeolus handing out a Bag of Winds, and no giant cannibal Lastrygonians. On Circe's island, it does show Hermes warning Odysseus about Circe and helping him. But after Odysseus resists Circe's magic, she tries to kill him. He runs away, breaks her spell, turns his crew back into humans, and there's an epic fight with her before they escape. There's also no Circe warning about the trials ahead, like how to avoid the sirens or escape Scylla and Charybdis. As Homer says, there is no defense, it's flight, not fight. And there's no journey to the underworld to speak with Tiresias. The Cyclops part is here too. Odysseus even tells him his name is Nobody, and they escape by hanging under the sheep, just like in the poem. But instead of blinding the Cyclops, they just throw something in his eye to distract him. No one dies here, except for Elpenor, who falls off a cliff and Athena turns him into a bird to save him. And he stays a bird for the rest of the story.
That don't make no sense!
This guy just can't catch a break. In the poem, he also got drunk on Circe's island and fell off a roof, breaking his neck. As it turns out, he's the one who ends up warning them about the sirens. After the sirens, we get Scylla and Charybdis, but again, nobody dies here. Odysseus sacrifices himself to stay behind and save them, and all of his men escape, and we never see them again. There's no prophecy about Helios's cattle, no island of the sun god, no Calypso, and no Phaeacians. The final part is very different. There's no Athena disguising Odysseus as a beggar, and no scene with the housekeeper recognizing him by his scar. And Telemachus doesn't go off on his father-hunting quest, but at least we do get to see Argos, the good boy. Here, Odysseus isn't very cunning. He rallies some supporters, storms the castle head-on, fails spectacularly, and escapes. He even comes back for a second try against the suitors. He's not very subtle in this version.
Oi! Next time, think twice before you try to steal my kingdom.
And he's the one who suggests the bow contest, stealing Penelope's spotlight. Also, the contest here doesn't have bending the bow to string it on its notch. It's just shooting through 12 axe heads. Antinous actually manages to shoot through all 12, though a little off target and not dead center. Odysseus, on the other hand, hits the bullseye with cartoon physics, and it's actually very funny. Obviously, there's no massacre of the suitors, and the rest of Homer's finale, Telemachus hanging the servants who betrayed them, Penelope testing him with the famous bed carved from the olive tree, Odysseus visiting his father Laertes, and the final clash with the suitors' families doesn't happen here. The last episode is about the Trojan War. So here Helen was tricked by Paris using a love spell that Aphrodite provided, and had her memory erased to take her to Troy.
I have lost something.
In the poem, there's a similar moment, when Helen tells Telemachus about Odysseus visiting her in Troy. But Homer doesn't mention her memory being erased, just, as he says, the infatuation Aphrodite gave her. It does show Odysseus sneaking into Troy like in the poem, only he doesn't disguise himself as a beggar. They do have the Trojan horse, but once they sneak out, they capture the city with zero resistance. The soldiers surrender faster than you can blink, so nobody dies here. After Troy, Odysseus finally starts his journey home. In Mission Odyssey, every episode starts with Telemachus back in Ithaca, doing something that kind of parallels what Odysseus is about to face. At the same time, Penelope is working on her tapestry, somehow weaving exactly what's going to happen next, like she can see the future. It's cartoon logic, we don't question it. And keep in mind, every part they adapt from the poem is very different here. The story kicks off with Odysseus and his army capturing Troy with the Trojan horse. And of course, nobody dies. Then Poseidon and Athena make a wager that Odysseus will be victorious by conquering Troy. But Poseidon raises the stakes. He says Odysseus only wins if he actually makes it home to Ithaca. That's why Poseidon hates him and keeps trying to stop him here. The man really needs to win that bet. Yes, the god of the sea is a sore loser and clearly has a gambling problem. One of the biggest changes in Mission Odyssey is Odysseus' crew. First, there's Diomedes, the old war veteran who fought alongside Odysseus, loyal to the core. Then Titan, the big guy from this icy Viking-style kingdom. He's the muscle of the group. Not exactly the brains, and very goofy.
Oh, get it together, big guy!
Philo is the musician and poet, but also the resident coward.
I'll get started on those sacrifices first thing tomorrow.
Nyssa is basically the kid version of Odysseus, very smart, with a prophecy gift she accidentally gets from Athena's owl. But nobody ever believes her. She's kind of like Cassandra from Greek mythology. Then there's Dates, the ship's captain and navigator, who's very greedy. Zephyr is the brave one. And of course, Athena's owl Owly, who is always helping the crew. So we have the Cyclops part. Here the Cyclops has this magic eyeglass that can mesmerize people. Odysseus still goes with the classic "my name is nobody" move. He fires an arrow and breaks the Cyclops' magic eyeglass, which pretty much blinds him, and they even escape by hiding under the sheep, just like in the poem. We also get Scylla and Charybdis, who were lovers until Circe turned them into monsters. We don't actually see Charybdis, just hear his voice. And of course, it's for kids, so nobody dies here. In fact, nobody dies in the whole cartoon. There's no Sicanies, but it does have the journey to the underworld to speak with Tiresias. Obviously, it's very different. They even show Hades and the three-headed hound Cerberus. It does have the siren part, even the bit with Odysseus tied to the mast. The sirens have a queen who wants to bang Odysseus.
We could make a great interspecies team.
Actually, most of the goddesses and princesses here want a piece of Odysseus.
They all want to know the secret of my boyish good looks.
But he's totally faithful to Penelope. It does have the Circe part, even the bit where she turns his men into swine. Circe is totally wild here, but there's no Hermes warning Odysseus, and no Circe warning about the trials ahead. The giant Lastrygonians show up. They were just fishermen who accidentally captured Poseidon, and he turned them into giants. There's no prophecy about Helios's cattle, and the sun god's island doesn't show up either. We get the Aeolus part, and he gives them a bag of winds, but no weird family this time. Actually, Zephyr is his son, and he's totally normal. The episode's design is really cool, very steampunk. The Calypso part is here too. She enchants Odysseus to make him forget his home, and even grants him immortality to keep him on the island. Obviously, it's very different from the poem, where Odysseus is held there for years, and the gods have to order her to let him go. It does have the Lotus Eaters, who are aggressively hospitable?
You are our guest whether you like it or not.
They capture people and force them to party. Poseidon magically changes their lotus, so anyone who eats it falls asleep and gets trapped in a dream world. There's no Phaeacians part, but we do get Nausicaa. She looks like an elf, and anyone who looks at her can't help but fall madly in love. So the last 2 episodes covered the last part of the poem, Odysseus coming back home, but it's completely different. Odysseus and his crew find a magical shell that grants wishes, and he wishes to be with Telemachus, so the ship heads toward him. Meanwhile in Ithaca, there's only one suitor pushing Penelope to marry him, but she insists on finishing her tapestry first. Poseidon, with the suitor's help, kidnaps Telemachus and leaves him stranded at sea. Odysseus eventually catches up and saves him, and they return to Ithaca. Odysseus throws away all his cunning, and with his crew, attacks the castle directly but fails. The second time, they manage to sneak in, and Odysseus goes to save Telemachus again. Meanwhile, Penelope and the suitor are about to get married, but the crew interrupts the wedding and pretends they are Odysseus. The suitor then says whoever can bend the bow is the real Odysseus, so everyone starts stalling until Odysseus finally shows up, bends the bow, and defeats the suitor in a very non-murdery way. So Odysseus reunites with his family, and Poseidon loses his bet, and everyone lives happily ever after. Obviously, pretty much nothing from the last part of the poem happens here, except we do get to see Argos, the good boy. So in Epic the Musical, it starts with Odysseus killing Hector's son after the fall of Troy, which doesn't happen in the poem. It does have the Lotus Eaters, but they're small creatures called the Winions, and the Lotus Eaters and Cyclops are actually on the same island here. In the Cyclops part, Odysseus still uses the nobody trick, but here he and his men actually fight Polyphemus with swords. It goes badly. Polyphemus crushes them like bugs and kills Polites, who has a much bigger role here. Odysseus mixes lotus into his wine to put him to sleep, then they blind him to escape. Athena is angry because Odysseus doesn't kill the Cyclops and leaves him alive, so she abandons him here. There's no Sicones, but we do get the Aeolus part. She gives them the bag of winds, and his crew stupidly opens it. That triggers a huge storm, and Poseidon kills most of his men instead of the Lastrygonians. So we don't actually see the giant cannibal Lastrygonians, who in the poem destroy almost all their ships except one. Here, Aeolus does still mention the giants though. In the Circe episode, she turns his men into pigs, but her character is different here. She only does it to protect her nymphs from men. Hermes does warn Odysseus, and Circe tells him about the underworld, but she doesn't warn him about the trials ahead, like the Sirens or Scylla and Charybdis. And no, Odysseus doesn't sleep with Circe here, unlike in the poem, where Circe forces him to sleep with her. He stays faithful to Penelope throughout the whole story here. The journey to the underworld to meet Tiresias is here, and so are the Sirens. But instead of Odysseus being tied to the mast, he first tricks them so they can capture the Sirens. Then they cut their tails and kill them in a pretty brutal way, which doesn't happen in the poem. Odysseus also gets them to reveal the way home, while in the poem it's Tiresias who gives him that guidance. In the Scylla part, Odysseus tricks his men so they get eaten by Scylla, which doesn't happen in the poem. Charybdis is also there, but it happens after Calypso's island here instead. Here Tiresias also doesn't warn Odysseus about Helios's cattle, and instead just tells him he'll be a changed man when he makes it home. But it does have the island of the sun god. Odysseus' men mutiny and tie him up, which doesn't happen in the poem. Here, after the crew kills the cattle, Zeus gives Odysseus a choice to save his men or himself, and Odysseus chooses himself. In the poem, Zeus just destroys their ship and kills everyone except Odysseus. It does have the Calypso part, and apparently she doesn't force anything on Odysseus here. She just keeps him on the island for years until the gods order her to let him go. And Athena has to convince all the gods to release Odysseus, and there's even an epic fight with Zeus, which doesn't happen in the poem. After the Calypso part, Hermes gives Odysseus another bag of wind and also tells him how to get home, which doesn't happen in the poem. Then we get an epic fight with Poseidon where Odysseus somehow beats the hell out of him, which obviously never happens in the poem.
I think I speak for everyone here when I say, huh?
In the original, Poseidon just destroys his raft, and Odysseus washes up on the shores of the Phaeacians. But here, there's no Phaeacians part at all. The final part is totally different. There's no Athena disguising Odysseus as a beggar, and nothing with the housekeeper recognizing him by his scar. Telemachus goes off on a journey and comes back, but it doesn't really say it's to learn more about his father like in the poem. Penelope sets up the contest, but Odysseus doesn't take part. He just returns and starts killing the suitors instead of going through the contest like in the poem. Here, the suitors are also planning to rape Penelope, which isn't in the poem. It does have Penelope testing him with the famous bed carved out of the olive tree, but there's no Telemachus hanging the servants who betrayed them. They also skip the ending with Odysseus visiting his father Laertes and the whole clash with the suitors' families. So now, which Odyssey adaptation should you watch? Well, keep in mind, Odysseus' story isn't exactly kid-friendly, and since most of the adaptations we talked about are aimed at kids, he usually comes off way more noble. He barely kills anyone and stays completely faithful to Penelope. Ulysses 31 and Mission Odyssey do cover most of the story, just with a lot of changes. Ulysses 31 is probably something adults will enjoy more, and by Zeus's beard, it's pretty cool. If someone disagrees, they can go to Hades. Mission Odyssey, on the other hand, is easily the most kid-friendly version of the Odyssey, and it's just a lot of fun. Also, Mythic Warriors, even though it's only 4 episodes and doesn't cover the whole story, it's still worth watching. And the series has a lot of other Greek mythology stories besides the Odyssey. And don't miss Wishbone, it's just 1 episode for the Odyssey, but the whole show is great. As for animated movies, there aren't really any direct adaptations with that Disney-level animation. They're fine, just not something I go out of my way to recommend, which is kind of weird. The House of Mouse never adapted the Odyssey. A random interesting fact we noticed going through all these Odyssey adaptations, Telemachus hanging the servants is never adapted in any movie or TV show. Let's see if Christopher Nolan is the one who finally breaks the curse. Also, almost all cartoon adaptations use the Latin name Ulysses instead of Odysseus.
You've thought way too much about this.
Now, some smart guy might ask, is there actually a faithful adaptation of the Odyssey? We actually made a video answering that exact question. We go through all the notable adaptations of the Odyssey in movies and TV shows, so if you like this video, definitely check that one out. Thank you for watching, and for more underrated movies, be sure to subscribe to Underrated Cinema.